na sehemu yangu, rafiki yangu wewe, katika safari yangu tatembea na wewe.
Kiambu politician Gladys Chania on suspicion of murdering her husband George Mwangi.
Neighbors and family have alleged that a love triangle could have been the main reason for the killing of Mwangi.
On September 13, 2022, 58-year-old businessman George Mwangi flew back to Kenya from Rwanda, where he managed his company. It was meant to be a peaceful visit, a chance to unwind and spend time with his family. But while he saw it as a routine trip home to his wife, Gladys Chania, it was something entirely different. A reminder of the cracks in their marriage that no longer could be ignored. For 2 decades, they had built a life together, raising a family and securing their future. But time had changed things. The warmth between them had faded, and the bond they once shared was now cold and distant. Gladys didn't understand why their love had died, but she knew exactly who had come between them. Lucy Modoni, a beautiful teacher who had captured George's heart in a way she no longer could. Their affair wasn't a secret to Gladys. She had seen the signs, the late-night calls, the unexplained absences, and the way her husband seemed happier when he was away from home. The betrayal cut deep. She had spent 20 years by his side, and now she was being replaced. But for George, there was no looking back. He had found love again, and perhaps he was ready to move on. What he didn't know was that this love triangle wouldn't end in heartbreak. It would end in blood. Allegedly driven by rage and betrayal, Gladys made a chilling choice. If she couldn't have George, no one else would. What happened next would shock everyone who knew them. A love story that had lasted 2 decades would turn into a murder investigation that gripped the nation. I'm Micah Hindi, and this is Shadows of Justice, where we uncover true crime stories from near and far. Like and subscribe to keep up with the darkest tales of betrayal, crime, and justice. Gladys Chania was a woman of many titles: a politician, a counseling psychologist, and a former teacher. Her journey began in 1995 in Mwangi district, where she worked as an educator. But just 2 years into the job, the tough conditions pushed her to resign. Seeking a new path, she joined the Red Cross as a coordinator, working in various hospitals across Thika, training midwives and supporting medical teams. Her passion for community service didn't stop there. She became deeply involved in charity organizations and played an active role in Kenya's Scouts organization, mentoring children and taking them on camps to equip them with life skills. Her dedication to others made her a well-known figure in her community, a woman admired for her generosity and leadership. It was during this time that she met George Mwangi, a young, ambitious engineer. He was drawn not just to her curvaceous beauty, but also to her drive and selflessness. Their connection was instant, and before long, they fell in love. Their love story led to a strong marriage that lasted 2 decades. Together, they built a family, raising 3 beautiful kids in a Christian home, instilling values of love, faith, and responsibility. To the outside world, they were the perfect couple, a family bonded by devotion and respect. Even as the years passed, Gladys never hesitated to express her love for George, often sharing affectionate posts about him, celebrating their journey together. But behind the warm words and public admiration, trouble was brewing. The love that once brought them together was slowly slipping away, making room for secrets, betrayal, and a tragic end no one saw coming. Throughout their marriage, George Mwangi was a pillar of support for Gladys Chania. He stood by her side, even when she made the difficult decision to leave him and their children in 2004 to pursue her education abroad. With his unwavering encouragement, she flew to the US, where she earned a bachelor's degree in sociology from Phoenix University in Arizona. Determined to go even further, she later traveled to the United Kingdom, where she completed a master's degree in child psychology at Leicester University. Years later, with prestigious qualification in hand, Gladys returned to Kenya, ready to make an impact. She established the Right Home Rehab Center in Thika, where she served as the lead psychologist, helping those struggling with addiction and mental health challenges. But her influence did not stop there. Outside her professional work, she was deeply involved in the Thika community. She mentored young girls in school, worked with incarcerated women at Thika Women's Prison, and provided food, aid, and mentorship to those in need. Her dedication to service earned her recognition, placing her in the circles of political heavyweights in the country. With her growing influence, she secured a nomination to vie for the Kiambu Woman Representative seat under the Jubilee Party ticket in 2022. Though she failed to cling the position, her political ambitions remained alive. She soon found a new home in Kanu, where she was appointed as the Women's Congress National Security. From a teacher to a psychologist, a politician, and a community leader, Gladys had built a name for herself. But beside her polished image and decorated career, darkness loomed, an unraveling personal life that will soon thrust her into the headlines, not as a leader, but as the prime suspect in a chilling crime. As Gladys Chania rose in her career, George Mwangi was also making strides of his own. A skilled civil engineer, he worked tirelessly to secure the family's future. He built them a grand home in Mang'u, a symbol of his success and dedication, while also investing in residential rentals to provide a steady income for their retirement. Business was thriving, and soon George set his sights beyond Kenya. He expanded to Kigali, Rwanda, where he established M International, a company that quickly grew into a lucrative venture. His growing responsibilities required him to relocate to Rwanda, leaving his wife to manage things back home. Gladys, too, was busy. She moved to Thika, where her rehab center was based, ensuring she was close to her work. But that wasn't all. Together, the couple had started yet another business, an events and planning company, which she focused on growing. Despite their demanding careers, their marriage had lasted over 20 years, built on ambition, teamwork, and mutual support. George's success became Gladys' strength as she threw herself into politics. They had built an empire together, a foundation that seemed unshakable. But behind the wealth, success, and public admiration, cracks were forming. Cracks that no amount of power or money could fix. And soon, the life they had built would come crashing down in one way no one expected. Like any couple, George and Gladys faced their fair share of struggles. The long-distance dynamic between Kenya and Rwanda, coupled with their demanding careers, slowly created a rift between them. Their once unshakable bond was now strained by time apart and conflicting priorities. Whenever George returned from Rwanda, All he wanted was to unwind with his family in their Mang'u home. But Gladys had a different vision for her life. Engulfed in politics and community work, she felt that settling in a quiet village didn't align with her ambitions. Instead, she chose to rent a home in Kimathi Estate, Thika, for convenience. That decision did not sit well with George. He was approaching retirement, and the idea of growing old alone weighed on him. He longed for companionship, someone to share his days with, someone who would make him feel loved and appreciated. And then, almost as if fate had stepped in, she appeared. One day, a woman approached George, interested in renting one of his houses. She was new in town, and the well-built rental units next to his Mang'u home had caught her eye. The moment George met her, he was speechless. Her name was Lucy Muthoni, a young, charming teacher who unknowingly filled the void he had been feeling for years. Slowly, George courted her, and before long, a romance blossomed. He found warmth in her presence, and with time, his longing for love turned into an affair. And to show just how much he meant to him, he granted her a rare privilege, one every Kenyan tenant would dream of. Lucy Muthoni would live in his rental house without ever paying a cent in rent. Sadly, this generous gesture became the very clue that exposed George's secret affair to his wife. As a sharp and detail-oriented woman, Gladys kept track of their rental home, but something didn't add up. One of the houses wasn't bringing in any rent. Curious and suspicious, she questioned their caretaker about it. His response sent a chill down her spine. She needed an answer. Determined to uncover the truth, Gladys dug deeper, and when she finally came face to face with the mysterious tenant, everything clicked. Standing before her was Lucy Muthoni, the woman who had unknowingly become her rival. The realization hit her hard. This was not just any tenant. This was her husband's lover, a woman who threatened the life and marriage she had built for over 2 decades. But Gladys was not one to back down. Armed with the weight of her political influence, she made her move. She used her status and authority to intimidate Lucy, scaring her off and making it clear that there was no room for a co-wife in her marriage. For a moment, it seemed like she had won. But what she didn't realize was that this discovery had set off a dangerous chain of events, one that would lead to a shocking and irreversible tragedy. Gladys was furious. Her husband's affair wasn't just a rumor. It was real, and worse, it was right under her nose. She couldn't understand it. What did Lucy have that she didn't? She was curvaceous, wealthy, and powerful. She had built a name for herself, established businesses, and even ventured into politics. But despite all her achievements, none of it seemed to matter to George. Instead, he found happiness in Lucy, a simple, present, and submissive woman. Someone who was always there when he needed company, unlike Gladys, whose ambitions kept her constantly busy. Their bond was undeniable. George didn't just see Lucy in secret. He proudly involved her in his life. He invited her to his grand Mang'u home, where she made herself comfortable, even taking selfies as if she owned the place. He let her drive his KBY 849M Hilux, cruising around town together whenever he was back in Kenya from Rwanda. They laughed, went out, and enjoyed each other's company openly, without a care in the world. To Gladys, this wasn't just betrayal. It was humiliation. The more George and Lucy flaunted their love, the deeper the rift in her marriage grew. Frustrated and unable to bear the sight of her husband's new life, she made a choice. She distanced herself, choosing to stay at her Thika home rather than risk facing Lucy again. But staying away didn't erase the anger. it didn't make the betrayal hurt any less. And deep inside, a storm was brewing, a storm that will soon turn deadly. As the election campaigns heated up, Gladys threw herself into her political ambitions, using the road and the roar of the crowds to drown out the chaos in her marriage. Winning the Kiambu women representative seat was her focus now, anything to keep her mind off George and his betrayal. Meanwhile, George was living his best life. With Gladys away, he spent his holidays in Mang'u, basking in the warmth of Lucy's company. She was no longer just a secret lover. She was now a central part of his life. He let her drive his car, the sleek Hilux, as they hopped from one entertainment joint to another, painting the town red. But George wasn't content with just that. He was done hiding. In a bold move, he introduced Lucy to his family. His mother, his sisters, everyone now knew about the woman who had stolen his heart. He made it clear that Lucy wasn't just a fling. She was here to stay. When word reached Gladys, it was the final straw. First, he let Lucy live rent-free. Then, he paraded her in their home, forcing Gladys to move out. He gave her their car, and now he was presenting her to his family as if she was the rightful wife. No, this wasn't just infidelity anymore. This was a complete takeover of everything she had built with George for over 20 years. She felt betrayed. She felt humiliated. And deep down, she knew she couldn't let this slide. Gladys was drowning in betrayal. The man she had loved, built a life with, and sacrificed for, had discarded her like she meant nothing. She couldn't take it anymore. The rage inside her boiled over, clouding every rational thought. When George made his final trip to Kenya, she decided it was time to teach him a lesson so severe it would leave a mark forever. On September 11, 2022, George landed from Rwanda, following his usual routine. He went straight to his Mang'u home, eager to spend time with Lucy. To him, it was just another visit, another holiday to relax and enjoy the company of the woman who made him feel alive. But for Gladys, this was different. Sitting alone in her thicker home, she was stilled in her silence, the weight of her emotions pressing down on her. Then she made a chilling post. "I have a plan." A plan so dark, she knew it was dangerous. As she drove, her mind raced. She felt the anger, the betrayal, the humiliation, but alongside it, a flicker of hesitation. She turned to God, pleading for her strength, for guidance. She sang worship songs, trying to drown out the storm inside her. Yet, despite the prayers, despite the hymns, the plan remained. And before the sun could rise again, blood would be spilled. The betrayal cut deep. It wasn't just another love anymore. It was about respect, about dignity, and for Gladys, that had been shattered beyond repair. She could no longer cook for the man she had once called her husband. She could no longer look at him without feeling the sting of humiliation. So, she decided if George had rewritten their love story, she would write its ending. Cryptically, she left traces of her dark thoughts online, subtle hints of the storm brewing inside her. But it was the events of October 8, 2022 that sealed this fate. That day, George invited her to accompany him to an event in Kiambu. It seemed like a simple gesture, perhaps an attempt at reconciliation, or maybe just for appearances. But when she arrived, she saw Lucy behind the wheel of their Toyota Hilux, the same car she had once driven as his wife. That was it. That was the final insult. She sat through the event, her mind elsewhere, her fury bubbling beneath the surface. Then, unable to bear it any longer, she left before George and Lucy. Meanwhile, George, oblivious to the storm he had unleashed, enjoyed his night. He laughed with friends, drank without a care, and soaked in the warmth of Lucy's company. When the evening came to an end, he drove her home, promising to take her out the next day. What he didn't know was that there would be no tomorrow. After dropping Lucy off, he made his way back to Mang'u, packed his hillocks, and climbed the stairs to his bedroom. Up there, in the silence of the night, Gladys was waiting, and she wasn't waiting to talk. As George settled into bed, the comfort of his home wrapping around him, he had no idea that his final moments had arrived. The very house he had built with dreams of a peaceful future became the setting of his brutal end. From the shadows, Gladys struck. A heavy metal bar came crashing down on his head. Once, twice, the force of betrayal, anger, and heartbreak fueled every blow. In an instant, the successful businessman, the man who had built homes, careers, and a family, lay lifeless in the very place he believed was his safest refuge. Gladys Chania stood over the lifeless body of her husband. The room, heavy with the scent of blood and betrayal, the very space that once held their love, had become a crime scene, a chilling monument to anger that had spiraled beyond control. Panic gripped her. This wasn't how she imagined it. The rage had blinded her, but now reality hit hard. There was no undoing what she had done. The only way out was to make sure no one ever found out. There was no time to mourn, no time for regret. The body had to go. She pushed aside her emotions and switched into survival mode. If she wanted to get away with this, she had to be smart, careful. Getting rid of a body was one thing, but fooling an entire nation, that was the real challenge. The plan had to be airtight. Her story was simple. If anyone asked where George was, she would tell them he had gone for a morning walk. He had left his phone and car behind, and since then, she hadn't seen him. As the sun rose on October 10, 2022, Lucy Muthoni woke up in high spirits, excited for her date with George. She had no idea that the man she adored was lying lifeless, wrapped in plastic, just miles away. Like any eager lover, she called him. No answer. Confused, but not yet alarmed, she reached out to one of George's close friends, hoping that he could get in touch with him. The friend, concerned, did as requested and called Gladys Chania directly. She didn't panic. Instead, she calmly fed him the rehearsed lie. George left for a morning walk and hasn't returned. It was the perfect response, reasonable, nonchalant. After all, George was an adult. He could come and go as he pleased. With the first hurdle cleared, Gladys turned her focus back to the crime scene. Blood had to be scrubbed. Any trace of the struggle had to disappear. For disposal, she needed supplies, but she was smart enough to know that buying anything new could raise suspicion. Everything had to come from home. She found plastic disposal bags, sturdy enough to wrap a body. But lifting and transporting a grown man alone, that was a problem. She needed help, someone who could follow orders and, more importantly, kept a secret. That's when she turned to her new farmhand, Morris Kamau. Meanwhile, rumors of George's disappearance were beginning to spread. People were whispering, wondering why no one had seen him. Sensing the tension, Gladys took to social media. She didn't acknowledge the missing husband talk. No, that would be too oblivious. Instead, she posted a casual history lesson on her Facebook page, a classic distraction tactic. She was steering the narrative, keeping the story under control. For now, back at home, George's lifeless body lay hidden in makeshift wrappings. TV boxes, sacks, and cement bags hastily patched together. It wasn't the most secure way to conceal a corpse, but it had to do. Yet, before she could get rid of the evidence, Gladys had one last act to perform. She had an interview on Kameme TV, a session where she was supposed to advise couples on good marriage practices. It was the perfect cover, appearing on live television to show that everything was normal. If anyone suspected anything, her presence on air would dismiss the rumors. And so, she smiled, spoke eloquently, and gave advice on how to keep a marriage strong, while her husband's lifeless body lay cold back at home. Once the camera stopped rolling, she wasted no time. She dialed George's mother, 10. In a calm and collected voice, she broke the news. "George is missing. I was thinking of reporting it to the police." It was all part of the script. If she played it right, no one will suspect her. But first, she had to go home. There was a body that still needed to disappear. With the body wrapped and ready, Gladys turned to one person she believed would keep her secret, her farmhand, Morris. Under the cover of darkness, he loaded George's lifeless body into the car, and together they drove deep into Kieni Forest in Gatundu North. There, far from prying eyes, they dumped him like discarded waste. It was done, or so she thought. To cover her tracks, Gladys walked into Mere police post on the evening of October 11, 2022, and filed a missing persons report. She played the part of a worried wife, insisting her husband had vanished without a trace. The case was officially recorded under OB number 181110/2022. But no amount of acting could erase the evidence left behind. The next morning, detectives began retracing George's last movements. Their search led them straight to his home, the very house where he had unknowingly walked to his death. And that's where they found it. Blood-soaked bedsheets, curtains, and clothes, all hidden in a locked room right next to the master bedroom. It was no longer a missing persons case. The truth was staring right at them. Without hesitation, they turned to Gladys Chania and placed her under arrest. The woman who once preached about marriage on TV now stood accused of the ultimate betrayal, murder. The story of George Mwangi's tragic end is a chilling reminder that love, betrayal, and jealousy can turn even the closest bonds into deadly traps. What began as a successful marriage, built on trust and ambition, ended up in a cold-blooded murder driven by resentment and a thirst for revenge. Gladys Chania, a woman once respected in society, allowed rage to consume her, turning her from a loving wife into a calculated killer. In the end, no amount of cover-ups, political influence, or deception could erase the truth. Justice always finds its way. This case is a lesson that no matter how painful betrayal may be, violence is never the answer. Anger fades, but the consequences of our actions last forever. If only Gladys had chosen to walk away instead of letting vengeance cloud her judgment, lives would not have been shattered. Power, wealth, and status mean nothing when faced with the weight of one's sins. In the end, the choices we make define our legacy. Nairobi Insight.